Hello everybody, welcome again to my channel. Thanks for clicking on this video. I hope you're doing well and I hope you benefited from the previous episode. So as you can see, today we are still talking about the relative pronouns, but today we are going to talk about the relative pronouns we use with time. Okay, we use with time, right? Now, always when we talk about relative pronouns that we use with time, our minds go directly to the pronoun when. Okay, so always our minds go to when, because we know that when is something that we use with time, either for questions or as a relative pronoun. When we use it with we can say clauses. Okay, with clauses, right? Okay, now the question, do we always use when with time? No, we can also use which. Okay, we can also use which instead of when. Okay, instead of when for a clause, okay, or with a clause to talk about a certain time, right? Now, when we talk about time, we can talk about something like, for example, a day, for instance. So day is something to do with time. We can talk about week, for example. We can talk about month, for instance, month, or a year, for example, or we can talk about a specific year, for example, 2022. This is a specific year, has to do with time. We can talk about morning, for instance, morning. Okay, we can talk about a season, for example. We can talk about autumn or spring, for example, spring. So all these are examples of what? Of time that have to do with time, and we can use either when or which with such expressions or time expressions, right? Now let's see these two very simple examples and then we complete the other sentences. All right, now number one, it was spring when I visited Madrid. Now here, as you can see, we have the relative pronoun when and we have spring. So spring has to do with time. This is very simple, okay, with time. So it was spring when I visited Madrid. Now here we used when very simply because here we are talking about something that we did. So visiting a place is what? Is something to do with doing, okay, with doing. It's something that we did in that, or we do in that specific time, okay, in that specific time. So very simply, when is related to what we do or something we do in that specific moment of time. So it has to do with doing, all right? It has to do with doing. So when for doing something in that particular time. Now let's go to number two. The morning which was freezing is really memorable. The morning which was freezing is really memorable. Now here again, we have the relative pronoun which, not when, and we have the morning. This is the morning, it is a time. Okay, it is a time. So as you can see here, we have a time, but here we have which and not when. Which was freezing is really memorable. Now let's go to the clause was freezing. Was freezing here, is it doing? No, but it is, we can say, describing, okay, describing, or we can say defining, both of them, defining or describing, okay, defining or describing. The morning which was freezing is really memorable. Now here again, for which, with the time, when we describe, okay, when we describe or define that moment of time, okay, for describing or defining that specific time, right? Now let's go to number three and number four. You can pause the video, try to complete them, and then we do it together, okay? Now, for example, in number three, it was 2019, the pandemic started. Now, here, 2019 is something to do with time, okay? It is a year, has to do with time, and the pandemic started. The pandemic started is something what? Here, are we describing the 2019? No, but we are talking about something that happened okay, happened in that time. We can talk about happening here again, happening, all right, happening, or something that started or took place in that particular time, okay? So here we can use very simply when, and we say it was in 2019 when the pandemic started, okay? Or so here the pandemic is something that happened, that took place during or in that particular moment of time, right? Okay, now let's go to number 4, spring. A bit warm is my favorite. So here the clause a bit warm. Now when we say a bit warm, here this has nothing to do with something happening or doing, but here we are describing that time, all right? So spring which is a bit warm is my favorite, okay? Spring which is a bit warm is my favorite. Now here is a bit warm is describing or defining that time, okay? Defining the spring. So spring is most of the time warm. So that's why it is my favorite, for example, okay? So I hope you find this very simple to grasp, to understand. If you have any question or suggestion related to this, don't forget or don't hesitate to let me know. See you in another episode with another lesson. In the description you will find some sentences to complete with which or when. See you in another episode. Have a good time and goodbye.